Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Expanse Season 3, Episode 11, Fallen World. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of the Expanse, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to Season 3, Episode 11. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain spoilers from the novels, so this video will be free from book spoilers. However, I will have a spoiler section at the end of my video for those who have read the novels, but I will give a proper spoiler warning before doing so. So this is another strong episode with a lot of interesting things to admire. I think overall, this season has been really strong, and there hasn't been a bad episode in the entire season. That being said, I felt, comparatively speaking, this was one of the weaker episodes this season. The pacing was a bit off, and overall, it was probably the slowest moving episode, so I found myself several times during this episode wanting them to move things along. However, when we did get to some strong stuff, I thought they sped through it too quickly and didn't give those moments enough time. So like I said, I think the pacing was off. But don't get me wrong, still a strong episode with a lot of great moments I loved. As I said, there's no such thing as a bad episode in Season 3 of The Expanse. So let's start with Anna's storyline, as this one was particularly creepy and unsettling. I mean that in a good way. So at the end of last week's episode, when one of the Martian soldiers threw a grenade at something inside the station, we see the speed limit instantly change inside the ring, and so all the ships going faster than this new speed limit, which was pretty much all of them, experience a massive deceleration. And we start the episode where we see just how dire the consequences of that is. And again, this is something unique to The Expanse, the way it deals with the laws of inertia in space that most science fiction shows will just skip over or create some magical device that will instantly solve it. So it plays off of how something as simple as instantly decelerating all the ships in this space can cause a massacre that kills like a third of the people there. And we see the aftermath of this carnage on the Thomas Prince through the eyes of Anna, who was strapped down to her crash couch asleep in her quarters at the time, which apparently was the safest place to be, as it's clear those who were most safe were those who were strapped in at the time, and those who were walking around were most at risk. So we follow Anna walking through the corridors to see tons of dead bodies and blood just floating around in 0G, which was very effectively creepy. She goes into the sickbay where the medical staff are caring for the wounded, and Anna, being a trained nurse, offers her services to help people in the room who are wounded, but the medic there explains that there's nothing to be done for them except make them feel comfortable. But Anna doesn't understand, as there's sutures and other high-tech medical equipment there that's capable of healing injuries like this. And then the medic explains to her how medicine works in 0G, as blood is unable to drain, therefore any internal bleeding or blood clotting or anything like that is a death sentence. Now, I must admit, as a layman, I didn't know this, but I do find it hard to believe that Anna didn't know this, because unlike me, she's been to space, and she lives in a time period where space travel is really commonplace. So it seems unlikely to me that she wouldn't already be aware of this. And so this dialogue here seems more intended for the audience rather than Anna, so the modern audience who live in a time where space travel isn't common. And you know what? I can forgive that, because it is in fact very necessary to relate this information to the audience, as this will in fact become a major plot point in this episode. And thus the audience needs to know this. As they're in a situation where all the ships are trapped by the alien device and are unable to make thrust, and thus cannot create gravity, and are stuck at 0G, with a bunch of people are severely wounded, and being at 0G with wounds like that is a death sentence, which means the death toll would be even higher. So again, I love the way The Expanse plays with scientific realities of being in space, the way most space sci-fi shows or films would not. So Anna is sent out looking for people with broken bones, as they can be helped, and sent to retrieve them and return them back to the medical centers where they can be treated. And Anna comes across Melba, who at this stage She recognizes but doesn't know that she is Clarissa Mal, that her friend Tilly mentioned. Melba does have a broken arm, so Anna takes her back to the sickbay to be treated, which she is. But then Anna gets a call from Tilly, who appears to be injured, so she goes off looking for her to find that she's been impaled by a pipe. So Anna desperately calls for medical aid, but it's a safe assumption that they have their hands full at the moment. But still, they promise their assistance as soon as they can. But in the meantime, Tilly tells Anna that this is her fault, and when she's confused, she clarifies that Clarissa Mal tried to kill her, which still confuses her, so she elaborates that Clarissa Melba wants to kill Holden. Now, I'm not sure if they are aware at this point that Clarissa destroyed the Sun Un, but I get the impression that Anna puts this together. And now she knows that Melba and Clarissa are the same person. Melba's behavior probably makes more sense to her. At any rate, I found the scene where Tilly dies extremely touching. I thought this was really well acted and even had some interesting special effects as her tears pooled in the way it would in Zero G, and you can see how affected Anna was by Tilly's death. Not that they were extremely close, but they were friends, and I'm sure she feels somewhat responsible, just like she did with the guy who killed himself. Anyway, this was a very powerful and well acted scene. So then Anna goes off with conviction to stop and find Melba. Now, why Anna doesn't just turn Melba into the authorities and get them to go after her, who are surely more qualified than she is to capture her, is a question. However, one can surmise that perhaps the Thomas Prince is being in such disarray and disorder after what just happened, that little remains of the authorities, and what little remains of them do have their hands full. Also, I do get the impression that Anna is taking this personally and does see it as her responsibility as she tried to help Melba, and in return she killed her best friend and is trying to kill more people. So I think she sees it as her responsibility to stop her, even though she's a priest, not a police officer. But regardless, she grabs a policing club from a security officer who's lying injured in sickbay and runs off to find Melba. Now, Melba, as it turns out, has learned that all the ships in the ring are now all floating next to each other towards the station at the center, so is planning to jump out into space to get to the Rocinante so she can finish the job against Holden. It's funny that none of this death and tragedy slows her down or makes her reconsider. Instead, she just sees this as an opportunity to finish Holden off. And by the time Anna catches up to her, it's too late and the airlock is locked, so Anna screams at her that she cannot escape what she's done. All she can do is beg for mercy, which of course Melba has no interest in doing. But this line is what makes me think that Anna knows that she destroyed the Sun Un, and so knows how much blood is on her hands, but maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, let me move over to Naomi and the Rocinante storyline. So we follow Naomi's perspective as she was in the Belter's gift when the new speed limit hit, but luckily it was strapped into her chair, and even though she was knocked out and experienced a lot of pain because of it, she was one of the lucky ones who was strapped in. However, when she tries to get the ship moving again, it doesn't go so well, and her console explodes, and I love the effects of the zero-G fire and how it just kind of bubbles up there, but Naomi manages to get her spacesuit on and open an airlock in order to put the fire out. After throwing a tool out into space to test the waters, she jumps out towards the Rocinante. We later see her arrive on the Rocinante, which was a very effectively creepy scene. I would even say it was horror-esque, as she's slowly crawling through the ship looking for her crew and no one's responding. It was very tense because I honestly had no idea what the show was going to do with Amos and Alex, so I was genuinely concerned. Worried that something bad happened to him, like Naomi was. That being said, the sequence perhaps went on a tad bit longer than it needed to, but it wasn't that big of a deal. At any rate, it was very creepy when she arrived at the mess hall and found Alex's headphones floating by with country music still playing from it, and food floating around. It made it very evident that he was in the mess hall when the speed limit hit. And sure enough, she finds Alex floating nearby. I must say, I was so relieved to see that he was okay. He wakes up for a brief moment, and when Naomi asks about Holden, Alex explains that he left a while ago with Miller, which was a funny thing for him to say. I wonder if Naomi chalked it up to delirium. Either way, I'm sure she'll find out soon enough what he means by this. At any rate, she gets him to the med bay and starts to treat him, but then goes off looking for Amos and finds him engineering and not in good shape. She cradles him and begs him to wake up and say something, and he does, and all he says is, "You changed your hair," which is just so typical Amos. However, I must say, I thought the scene with her cradling him in tears was quite touching and a very effective reunion. Anyway, we later see Naomi caring for the two of them in sickbay, where Amos regains consciousness again and asks Naomi if she's there to help, or just to help, or if she's there to stay, and she responds that she's there to stay, and in a very heartfelt way, and explains that she realized that she never should have left. But Amos seems unmoved by this. I'm not sure if it's because he still feels betrayed by her and isn't willing to forgive her so easily, or if it's just because he's too wounded to show to show any enthusiasm. Perhaps a combination of both. We later see Naomi trying to repair the Rocinante when she gets an alert in the airlock of something coming through, but the cameras there don't work, so she doesn't know what it is. We, the viewer, of course, know what it is. That is Clarissa come to kill Holden, and so we get a cool spacesuit fight with Melba wearing the funky spacesuit that has some like mechanical arms. Naomi tries to float away, but Melba grabs her and pins her down, demanding to know where Holden is. And when Naomi tells her that he isn't there, and she naturally doesn't believe her. And Naomi responds simply by saying that even if she did know where Holden was, she wouldn't tell her, which I loved. It was a great Naomi moment that shows even in the face of death she'd be faithful to Holden. But Melba no doubt knows who Naomi is. If she studied Holden, she surely knows who his crew is and that they helped take down her father as well, so I'm sure she's more than happy to kill Naomi. But thankfully, Anna shows up at the last second with the stun club that she took and zaps Melba. Now, last week I got some flack for bringing up the books, and I can understand from the perspective of some other shows that I watched based off of source material that I didn't read, how annoying it can get when some reviewers just drone on about how the show isn't as good as the books. But that being said, I have read the book, so I can't help that informs my opinion in some places, and in many instances that concerns the Expanse, I feel the show improved upon the novels more often than not. And I do very much understand how adaptations work, and sometimes what works for the page doesn't work for the screen, and it wouldn't be served by doing a straight one-to-one translation. All that being said, there are also instances where an adaptation isn't as good as it could be and fails to translate something that was good in the novels, and I do personally feel this is such an instance, as I was massively disappointed in this scene as it was over too fast. It was kind of what I meant at the start of this video, that the pacing of this episode was off. As in the novels, the scene where Melba comes on the Rocinante and Anna shows up to stop her is much longer, much more intense, and much more involved. And frankly, I think it serves the story so much better. Where here, this felt kind of like a brief throwaway action sequence with a cliched Deus Ex Machina resolution. And judging this scene just on its own and forgetting what I know about the novels, I would say it felt rushed and was kind of disappointing way for Melba, who has been presented as the main villain of this portion of the story, to be taken down so easily. To quote Darth Vader, it was all too easy. Now, this may have been due to budget constraints, which is understandable, but I still would have rather gotten a more involved, more intense action sequences on the Rocinante, rather than spending 20 minutes with Ashford and Drummer trapped in the room singing. But whatever. Anyway, speaking of Ashford and Drummer, let's go ahead and get to these scenes with them trapped in the machine room, where Drummer is trapped on one side of this farming equipment cart thingy, and Ashford is trapped on the other side. They determine that they can't turn it on and roll it because to move it forward would kill Ashford, and to move it backward would kill Drummer, so they need to find a way to float it upward, but all their attempts to do so or to contact help fail. And this was kind of predictable. I kind of knew from the beginning that it would end with one of them sacrificing themselves for the other, and since Drummer was the one by the controls, that meant it had to be her sacrificing herself to save Ashford. So all these scenes with them pretty much just a waste of time waiting for that to happen. This whole storyline reminded me a lot of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Disaster, where the Enterprise suffered a space earthquake or whatever, and people were trapped in various rooms. Although there are dozens of disaster films and episodes of TV that were like this, where two characters who don't really like each other are trapped in a room together by a disaster, and so they have to bond. It's such a tired cliche that I've seen dozens of times before, and in this particular case, it went on for far too long. That being said, I did enjoy some of the interactions between these two characters and the greater appreciation each of them gained for the other because of it. I did like seeing them work together to try to grab the floating hand terminal. It shows that they can work together, and Ashford's talk about the uniform I did think let Drummer know that Ashford was serious about his commitment to the belt and making this new OPA nation state work regardless of his own personal vanity. And so when she said that the ship can't afford to lose both of them, she meant it, but wouldn't be willing to kill because of it, so instead sacrificed herself so that Ashford could live. Now, I am curious to whether or not Ashford thought she was going to kill him, or if he knew that she was trying to sacrifice herself. It did seem like he was a bit scared that he was about to be killed, but from the way she was talking about him getting what he wanted, I think it was made clear that she was going to sacrifice herself. But I'm not quite sure about this. In any event, I did find it much more interesting afterwards when Ashford got out, as he admits that Drummer saved his life and that he wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for her, and when he learns that they have over 100 wounded but no way for them to heal because they have no gravity, he orders them to spin the drum so that their wounded can heal. But he looks specifically at Drummer when he says this, so I think he was specifically thinking of her and just doesn't want to let her die, especially after she sacrificed herself to save him. So I do think his heart is in the right place and his intentions are pure, and so he orders them to spin the drum, thus creating gravity in their ship, as the Behemoth was originally designed as a generational ship, so the idea was to create its own gravity to be an artificial environment that generations could live their entire lives in. But he never actually this spinning the drum has never actually been used before, so they didn't know if this would work or rip the ship in half. But I like how Ashford pointed out that if it did tear the ship in half, well, they wouldn't really be much worse off than they are now. So they spin the drum and it works, and so Ashford contacts all the other ships and invites them to bring their wounded on board so they can heal. So I do think this is the smart thing to do, and Ashford realizes that if the OPA wants to be recognized as an independent nation, that they need to reach out to other superpowers and offer them aid when they can. So this was a smart move politically and the right thing to do. However, all that being said, there were a few warning signs in Ashford's behavior. First of all, the way he had to climb to the top level of that balcony or whatever it was before he gave the order to spin the drum did seem kind of like he was reveling in the power and acting sort of like the king who wants to rule over his subjects. In his words to the fleet inviting them on, he called himself captain, not second in command, not acting captain, not temporary captain, but captain. And he specifically called the Behemoth my ship. So even though I think his gratitude to Drummer for saving his life and his desire to save her life is sincere, I do think he's getting a bit power hungry and reveling in his new command position more than he should, and letting it get to his head. So I frankly have concerns on how willing he would be to give it up, but we'll just have to see. So let's finally move over to Bobby Draper in The Martians, and we begin with them right where they left off in the previous episode, with Holden collapsed on the ground inside this protomolecule station. She grabs Holden and wants to return him to the ship as he doesn't appear to be breathing, but another Marine there claims that Holden killed their LT, but has... they go to make their way back. Bobby warns them to stop and to fire an RPG first, and they do it, and it gets stopped by the purple haze, and from that Bobby is able to determine the new speed limit, which was indeed very smart of her, as they would have been stopped by the purple haze too had they gone too fast, and they would all be stuck there. But they manage to make it back to the dropship, where Bobby tries to treat Holden, but the other Marine continues to express the opinion that they might as well just kill Holden, as he thinks that he's responsible for killing their lieutenant and for what happened to all the ships in the ring, which is of course ridiculous, and Bobby points this out, that Holden had nothing to do with it, that it was the station, and the Marine then accuses Bobby of having too much sympathy for Holden, but she explains that she was ready to kill him, and she shot at him at the station. Now, I did see this coming, the part about the Martians blaming Holden for their lieutenant's death, as it is totally in character for them. That being said, it's also incredibly obtuse, so I knew it was going to happen, and it is in fact in character, but it's still frustrating and a bit typical, so I hope they don't dwell on this point for too long. At any rate, when Bobby talks to the pilot, she learns what happened with all the ships and how they're in a state of emergency now, with nearly a third of the Martian ship dead and another third severely injured. But more than that, the pilot explains that with the new speed limit, it will take them days to return to the Martian ship and 7 months for any ship to return to the exit of the ring, and only small ships like skiffs can still move, and there isn't enough room to evacuate everyone, and either way there's not enough provisions for everyone to last that long, so the situation is in fact very dire. And I do like the way Bobby just dismisses it. It's like, we'll figure something out, which is kind of funny. So Holden sleeps pretty much through the entire episode, waking up only at the very end, which is a bit disappointing because his storyline and his interactions with Miller is probably my favorite aspect of the show at the moment, so I was a bit disappointed we didn't get any of that in this episode, but I'm sure we will get more in the coming episodes. But still, I couldn't help but be disappointed. Now, the Martian a-hole guy makes some dumbass comment about how Holden got to sleep through all of this like a baby, but Bobby points out that there's a lot of brain activity going on, and the pilot takes the a-hole guy's side in thinking that this is somehow Holden's fault. And when Ashford makes the announcement of helping save the wounded, the a-hole guy makes another a-hole comment about belters, and when Bobby tries to talk some sense to them, even the pilot sort of shakes her head at them. So really, fuck these idiots. But I do hope we don't spend too much time with them because, screw them. Anyway, when Holden finally does wake up, Bobby is there to ask him what happened, and he explains that he had a vision, and when she asks what he saw, he explains he saw the end of everything. Ooh. Meaning the whole human race is in peril, and thus we end with this great cliffhanger. Dun dun dun! But I really like it. I thought it was a great way to end the episode, and I absolutely cannot wait to see how they resolve this in the season finale. So my rating for Fallen World out of 10 is a 7, very good. Some very strong moments such as Naomi and Amos reunion, Tilly's death was really touching, and Ashford spinning the drum was a really exciting moment, and overall seeing the aftermath of all the ships being slowed down instantly, and what that had was really effectively creepy and intense. But as I mentioned, this episode had a few pacing issues, as I did not think it was necessary to spend so much time with Drummer and Ashford trapped in a room, and the fight scene with Melba coming on the Bosnatu ended far too quick and was ultimately a very anticlimactic ending for this character. But as always, The Expanse delivers in high quality television. So that's it for my spoiler-free section of my review of Fallen World. I'll be back next week to review the 2-part season finale, which I'm really looking forward to. And this Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard US time, I will be doing a live discussion video with Abkin Tomko and Darren from D's Reviews. I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so be sure to check that out, as well as many other videos I do on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. However, for those of you who have read the novels, you can stick around for my spoiler section, which begins now. R.I.P. Tilly Fagan. Tilly, you didn't fare as well as your book counterpart, and we certainly didn't know you as well as we knew her, but you will be remembered. At any rate, with Tilly now dead, and it is very clear that Cortez is gone and clearly not coming back, it does seem like they are setting up to streamline the rest of the book storyline and do it within 2 episodes. And while this prospect is a bit disappointing, as this is pretty much the halfway point of book 3, meaning they plan on doing the entire half of the book, the whole other half of the book, in merely 2 episodes, if it is true that they're ending this with book 3. And that is really disappointing, and no doubt a lot of things will be left out. But that doesn't necessarily mean I think it will be bad. I do think there's a way that they can do it and keep it interesting. In fact, it may be even more interesting and exciting and intense in some aspects, because condensing the story is leaving out all the filler and leaving out all the slow parts, so maybe it would actually be even better that way. So we'll just have to see and wait to see how it's handled. That being said, I have heard some speculation out there that Ashford will take on Bull's storyline, and I still very strongly disagree with this. Ashford is going to take on Ashford's storyline, as it's obvious to me that they're setting him up to be the villain. And after particularly getting this scene in this episode where he's obviously power hungry, I think we'll get a sequence very similar to the one in the novels where he's in command and tries to destroy the station thinking it will save humanity, but Holden knows it will actually condemn humanity. And thus it will be an epic sort of Civil War mutiny battle type thing on the Behemoth. At least that's my prediction and my hope, but we'll see. Anyway, that's all I have for spoilers this week, so I'll see you guys next week.